not another one. God, how much I hate these enemies, guys. Words can't describe how much I hate this enemy. I want to be very clear here. This game is not hard. It is tedious, okay? Every time you fight enemies, it's tedious. Playing the game on hard, or even more the fog difficulty, is just a tedious endeavor, okay? People cope so hard saying that, oh, this game is hard, just play on a normal story, blah, blah, blah. The problem isn't that the enemies are hard, guys. The problem is that they just never die. Incredible, spongy, bullet, kind of hell enemies, just never falls. Like, the boss fight takes like probably 5 times as long as they take. These enemies are the worst though, the goddamn predator monster. End of the game, you have to fight like 3 of them in a row, and it's so incredibly annoying. You have to take a gauntlet of predator monsters, they spawn more monsters, it just never ends. When I got here, guys, this is the 3rd predator monster in a row in like the last 30 minutes. I quit the game here. I was like, okay, I quit the game. I took a break for the game for one day. I was like, oh no, it's another one. It's another one. They just never die. There's too much health points, bottom enemies. I was like, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's review Silent Hill Frustration. This game is honestly kind of hard to review because I have a very hard time saying exactly what I would score the game as. It very much feels just like the game is. There's 2 different universes. One, like the real universe, which is this and the otherworld universe. They look something like this. You need kind of weird red mystery thing, right? This is the first real boss in the game then. But the problem with the game is that, first of all, these 2 different universes are very, very uneven, where the city is much more interesting to explore, and it's just consistently a lot of fights in the other universe, really. But the big problem, of course, is the combat. The combat in this game is atrocious. It's a really, really terrible combat design. So the reason the game's combat is so bad, it's just so clunky. It's honestly just incredibly unresponsive. Every attack is very slow. Like, you do one attack with the main character, then she basically is like stunned for 10 seconds. But so is also the enemy. So if you punch this mannequin dolls, right, like a charge attack, they will be stunned for, let's say, 15 seconds. And she stands there for 10 seconds catching her breath. So it's basically like nothing happens for 10 seconds, then you charge again and you kill them. So the combat is just really slow, weirdly moving. The dodge is incredibly strong, so the game again isn't hard. But when you do the dodge, you fly like half the meter away from them, and everything just feels really off, right? You enter the enemies, and I'm sure you got here. You do this one swing attack, you know, and now the enemy gets basically like stunned, right? So it's not hard. I want to be very clear here that the game isn't hard, okay? The first cope that I've seen, right, and I really mean cope, and I'm honestly kind of tired of it, right, is the people defend this game saying that, oh, you're just using the buttons wrong, right? When you fight them with this naginata, you have to use the charge thing or the focus or whatever, so on. The game's combat isn't complicated. The game's combat is very, very simple, right? People keep comparing it to Dark Souls or whatnot, and it certainly feels a little bit like kind of the Souls games. But basically, you have a fast attack, right? A charge attack. Later you learn to focus, you can charge even... Focus is basically like an even slower attack, right? You just have this meter, and then you can do an attack. However, when you're focusing, the world also slows down, so you do a counter attack. When the enemies are kind of flashing red, you can counter attack them. And that's basically it. You also have a little bit different weapons, but you can't actually change weapon that easily, because weapon keeps breaking, right? Like a Zelda and so on. And that's basically it. And sure, you have a little bit of health meter, sanity meter, so forth. But honestly, right, the combat system is very simple, okay? This is rocket science. Trust me, I know rocket science. This is a very simple game. It is not hard. I know it sounds silly to say, oh, it's not hard, but honestly, right, people keep defending this game by saying that, oh, if you play on hard, or even then super hard, the next difficulty, Lost in the Fog, you have to blame yourself. It's supposed to be hard, but it isn't hard, okay? It is tedious. I keep saying it's tedious, it's boring, it's very, very repetitive. As I said in the intro in the video, right, when you play this game, it is, the essential feeling is constantly less is more. Enemies should have less health. It should be way frequently less enemies, right, and so forth. And what you see right here is part of the otherworld. and I mean it seriously, guys, this game would be a better game if this team was like in half, okay? Like you should remove half of the otherworld. So the whole game is like less is more. Let's show what I mean here. Truly it's less is more. I think in the beginning, the otherworld area is fine. It's a little more mystery. You're trying to figure out what is happening. You follow the fox guy, god guy, whatever it is, that another dude. And at this moment, I didn't mind this otherworld. It was like fine, right? But I keep saying here, and I really emphasize this point, right? Less is more. This is around already here at the beginning of the game where this part starts getting just tedious. So already at the second time you're in the otherworld dungeon, so to speak, it would be a better game if it was cut in half, okay? This whole game is less is more. The otherworld dungeon is terrible padded. It's so tedious. It's just like room after room in the catacombs with the exact same enemy over and over again, right? All the otherworld parts are super easy. The puzzles are terrible. It's like pick up an item, go 50 meters, pick up an item, go 50 meters, right? But there's so many enemies. It's just really boring. So that part should be cut in half. So terrible. Every enemy is so incredibly bloated. They have far too much health points, and this enemy especially, right, is the pinnacle of this terrible game design. They keep spawning more enemies, and it's the same as over time, and they just never die. And I keep saying it, less is more. Fewer enemies, fewer padded dungeons. It would be a better game. And of course, these two are combined, right? Because especially in the otherworld, where there's so many enemies in these tight catacombic spaces, right? Again, it's not hard. It's just like boring. You're like, oh, I have to kill like 35 of these, I don't know, mannequin enemies over and over and over and over again, right? Until it finally ends, and it just keeps going like this. And the game truly felt to me, right? And I liked it in the beginning, and the more I played the game, the less I liked it. And it really comes back to that the game would be a better game if I could remove like half the game, and that's not a good sign. And I cannot believe this game has so many good reviews, because I'm like, come on guys, the actual gameplay is just atrocious. Core gameplay is very flawed. It's straight up, right? Before we get into that, I do want to say though, this is why this review is hard to make too, because I am a big fan of Higurashi When They Cry, both of course Shinshinida and also Umineko, and I have reviewed them on my channel and so on. So I like these shows, right? I like the author's work, Higurashi before, and I don't really mind at all Silent Hill's F storyline. People are complaining about it, but I actually think it's pretty good. So I might be biased then, because I do like all the previous work, but I actually think the storyline in the game is pretty solid. This show have it primarily is predictable. I think its other works are better, but I think it is fine, and I don't really see the issue people going, oh, it's feminist or whatever. I mean, no, because the author tends to write about children killing each other. That's kind of his main thing, right? And of course, having like an abusive father or whatever is kind of his, go-to storyline. So that didn't bother me at all. But I've seen the author's previous work, like I said, all of them. So I'm like, okay, I see this is the Ryo kind of style. Okay, I'm not really bothered by it, right? You have to beat the game more than once to get the full storyline. I don't mind it either. I think it could have been done. Honestly, I think it could have been done better though, per se. It could have been done more smoothly, like the New Game Plus could have to carry on items or whatever. And when I played the game, of course, then, after beating it once on hard, the next playthrough, I put it on easy, right? Because, again, the gameplay is actually pretty terrible, so that's why I go quickly through it. But that's my point, though. It's like, okay, I finally beat the game. That is a genuine feeling in heart. Oh, I finally beat the game. But I do want to see the alternative endings and more to the storyline, okay? I guess I put it on easy now and I just run through the game because I don't want to have to actually play the gameplay, right? Because I don't mind the storyline, I don't mind the graphics or whatnot, right? And I want to put out here, I think the game does a really good job when it comes to the atmosphere. I think some of the details are really good in this game. I love it in the beginning of the game that you don't see Junko's face, your big sister. So I immediately was like, huh, suspicious that sister, right? Why are they never showing her face? I like that intrigue, right? I like that you later find some papers about someone in the family, or maybe some bloodline issues, having some facial issues, and it's like a historical thing with that family, in ethics perhaps, maybe some culting, right? Maybe something in between. So I like that mystery, I keep saying that. I like how that is presented. I like how you find stuff. This plays a lot of the world building and so forth. And I do like to have to replay the game more than once to get more of the storyline. What I would prefer though is that the storyline actually gave you more options the first playthrough, right? So you have different endings even the first playthrough. But I digress. I still think this all of this part works in the game, okay? The story, atmosphere, the details, graphics, all that stuff, right? And also, of course, this moment here, which is probably my favorite moment, where you, of course, save Rinko, and immediately I was like, oh no, she's gonna kill me, or she's trying to kill me, because I assumed she was the one that wrote the evil notes on the scarecrows. So the whole storyline of like, oh hey, beware of Rinko and so on, this part I love in the game. So the actual storyline, atmosphere, VFX, voice acting, all this stuff is at hit F. I think it's really, really good. The problem, of course, with the game is the actual gameplay. It's a very frustrating game. Silent Hill F's frustrating. Because, yeah, the actual story, aesthetics and so on is great, and then the actual gameplay is terrible. And the game is like, I don't know, a 5 out of 10? Or, I don't know, it's really hard, honestly, I feel, to like judge this game, right? Where if it's like half the game is great, another half is just really terrible. There's this transitional mixture of the game, right, that also works really well. And this is kind of what you see here. You're walking around this thing, it's like an edge, it's a corner somewhere, right? You hear some sound effects, and it's probably like a zombie or something like that hiding behind this corner. It might jump at you from the trees, right? So these moments here in the gameplay also, I think, works really well. The sound in the game, I think, is really spot on. You hear the clacking around in the scarecrow field. You hear they have like a specific like kind of wooden sound when you're walking, so on, right? So that thing is really, really great. So in these moments, the gameplay is also excellent, or at least, I mean, it's bearable at least. But the problem is that, as I said earlier, beginning of the game, I think it feels really great, right? But you play the game for about maybe 4 or 5 hours, and you are getting really tired of just a straight up terrible combat, right? Just terrible combat. Now instead, you get these kind of moments where you should feel, oh, this is exciting, this enemy hiding somewhere, what should I do, whatever, right? You feel more a dread of like, I hope it isn't like another pregnant woman or like 4 mannequins at the same time or something. It takes so long to kill them. Again, it's not hard, it's not scary. You're just kind of like, okay, hopefully it's not that bad. It's more than kind of like, oh no, not another tedious place, right? So it is really weird. So it goes from like a good horror feel to just being like, hopefully it's not too many enemies this time around, you know? And that's just a depressing feeling. And the game is really weird. It's really weird because sometimes these scary moments really works in the game, even in the gameplay style, right? I keep saying it, I think the storyline works fine and so on. I also feel that the actual, like I say, the cutscenes were great, some, you know, body horror or whatever, right? I think all that worked, right? So the game delivers on that, and I agree with that, that's a good delivery. But it's like, these middle part of like, it's scary or not, it doesn't really work. And especially like the later game, it gets more and more, again, tedious. I think a great step for that is generally, especially how your house feel. This is when you're back home then, right? And in this gameplay, I hated this game so much, seriously, in this part here, I think other people agree with me, because it feels like almost every goddamn door you open, it's gonna be one of those mannequins, right? And every time you enter a room like this, you pick up an item or whatever, almost every time a mannequin will stand behind you. It's just like, it's getting so tedious, right? But also, the game actually really fails on being scary, right? Because if I assume that every time I walk outside this room, it's gonna be a new enemy, right? If that was happening so often in this game, obviously I'm not gonna get scared anymore, right? Even the jump scares in this game stops working on you because they're so frequent. It's basically the only thing the game tries to do with you all the time. So it's like, when you're walking around this house the first time, I wasn't scared anymore, right? Because I've seen how the game is consistently use the same thing over and over again. We're coming back to that less is more. The game would actually be scarier if it had fewer enemies. The game would be scarier if the enemies were less frequently always standing behind you or always appearing and pick an item. So many times in this house too, when you grab an item, the item will spawn in the room next to you, like in the same room suddenly, or be behind you when you leave the room. That makes no sense, but whatever, right? Which is so frequent that it actually removes the fear from you. No matter how you look at it, if the gameplay is just, you know, again, tedious or whatnot, right, so forth, the enemies are just way too few. This, like, mannequin woman doll thing, replacing the nurses, I suppose, from the previous games, they are basically like 90% of the fights. Like, it's probably seriously, like more than that, yeah. They're so incredibly common. In almost every dungeon, you just face this woman over and over and over again. And there's so many of them hard difficulties. Right? So you face them like 10 times per room. Something you can run past them, whatever, surely. But still, it's just this enemy over and over again. Later you will face this like blind guy in Netherworld. And then this is like face red glowing guy. That's the same enemy. It's the exact same enemy. It's another VFX over him, right? So the game has only like 4 or 5 enemies. The game seriously has incredible lack of enemy types. Yeah, I think honestly the game only has like 4 or 5 enemies. Then plus a few bosses. The actual bosses, like seriously. It's incredibly few enemies, right? And of course I keep saying it, but this is the opposite point of my video, less is more, right? Because the game has so many high frequency of enemies, right? And then this enemy will of course arrive over and over again. I mean, obviously like my point is that it gets worse, right? Because you have so few enemy types, and then yet you have so many enemies spawning at you basically, right? Which of course means that this enemy in particular will be like so often, right? So often, yeah. So it just gets worse. If you at least had like, you know, let's say if you double, right, the number of enemy types, 8 instead of 4, and then you still had the exact same frequency of enemies, that would still obviously be a lot better, because you will have a different variation. Sure, it's an enemy every time you open a door, but, you know, it's like a different enemy, you know, random-wise with 4 or whatever, right? Now instead, it's like you open the door, it's always this woman, basically. But there's a thing, too. The other enemies, like the baby-face jumping child thing, whatever it is, right? It does appear, but very less than this one. Very, very, very little of it. It basically only appears later on with this one at the same time. And the pregnant monster type spawns these ones, right? So you had more of them anyway. And then, again, like I mentioned, the faceless guy is the same guy. He basically appears running after you. He's going to avoid him. So it's like more or less it's this enemy over and over again. And it also doesn't help them, of course, right? With the enormously high frequency. So there are a few other enemies, of course, right? It's like a mid-boss you face a few times or whatnot. But basically, this boss basically almost never appears. I don't know how to explain it really. It appears like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times in total in the whole game, right? Where that mannequin woman appears like, yeah, like I said, that one appears like 500 times. So, yeah, instead of having like those mannequin women, you know, like 10 times in this dungeon, maybe it could be, let's say, 2 of those and 1 of those biggest again, right? Just that kind of like game design where you kind of just balance the encounter type or whatever, right, would also help. So I think it is actually kind of noobish how they made it, because even with the few enemies you have, they still could have had a better balance of the few enemies you see, right? I mean, seriously, am I the only one? Like, it feels like that's a big issue in the game. Now, in the game, you also have different weapons, right? It's a different rule setting, basically, for the otherworld and like the real world then. So Naginata here is in the otherworld, so it never breaks, where the weapons in the real world will break a lot, right? And that's also kind of annoying. But overall, every weapon is works the same, okay? Let's just be honest here. This is my point again on the whole like, lack of variation, right? Because, sure, the Naginata has like a longer reach to hit more enemies with it, and a knife or whatever. But overall, the difference is very, very little, right? You either have weapons that are fast, weapons that are slow, and the slow ones have slightly better reach, and you can maybe hit more enemies easier, right? But overall, the gameplay basically only has 2 different weapons, and because they break then in the real world, right, you're basically stuck on whatever you currently have. You can repair that with this called toolkit, but overall, it basically feels like I am using whatever I grab the latest. So that's how it kind of feels, and there's not much like strategy in the game, right? And that's a big issue in the game as well. Like I said, it's easy. The game isn't hard, right? Actually hard, so to speak. And it's not like that I will save and say, oh yeah, on this boss, I'm going to have the baseball bat. And on the other boss, I'm going to use the axe. No, the axe is just better, right? So there's no actual like strategy, really. The best weapon you will find, you will keep with a toolkit on that one. And if it's about to break, you will change the weapon to the worst ones, right? And then you go back to the better weapon, you have another toolkit to fix it again. So it never feels like I'm changing a build or something like that. Not at all. And when you're playing in the other world instead, Naginata here is, where nothing breaks then, right? you will use Naginata basically always as soon as you get it, right? Because it's better than the other one, more or less, how you fight. And this, again, it's not really strategy there. And the whole managing of like sanity, health, or whatever, the same thing is like, it's not real strategy. You just use the healing item you have, right? Except the most obvious thing that, okay, you have one healing item, it's your full health, and so you use that when you have less health, right, than the one is half health, okay? And that brings us to items, of course. Items are terrible in the game. I mean, seriously, you have to just abandon like half the stuff you find. You never have any space for them. It's super annoying. So I'm definitely not the first person to critique it on this spot. It's a very, very obvious issue in the game. And there's a whole item management. This feels like I'm back in, like 92 or something. This is terrible. It's so bad. I'm lost for words. It's so bad. So basically, right, you will find huge amounts of items in the game. Like, just a lot of items. Most of them are terribly, though. Yeah. The balanced items is very, very weird. But whatever. The bigger point is that your item space will be filled, like, all the time. And as you can see here, then you can take these items, right, and go like and sell them to the shrine. Then you get like fate points, and then you can buy stuff with that, or like upgrade your character. So what happens basically in the gameplay, right, is that you will find an item, like for example the what's called shriveled Abura Age, and then there's a lot of fate, right? Then you run back to the shrine and you sell it, and then you go on the adventure. So I think a lot of times you basically find a save station, right? And you start entering the new dungeon basically, and as soon as you find like 2 or 3 items, you have to return there and sell them, because otherwise your item thing will be immediately like, it's full. Yeah, you can't pick up more items. So you basically learn to just like pick up 2 or 3 items, go back, sell them, deep into the dungeon, pick up 2 or 3 items, go back, sell them, or you have to discard the items you have when you find the 4th or 5th or whatever item. It's super annoying. It's never like stuck. It's also this really weird way it works too. So for example, you have 8 different buttons, right? You can swap between 4 and 4 as you want to use. And I noticed that if you fight on a boss and then you like swap how you want to use the item, and then you like have to replay the boss, right? Then it will revert back to the previous state or something. Like, it's really weird. Like, it just feels like it's bad code, honestly. It doesn't save when you had in your previous continuation thing, or I don't know how it works, but it seems really buggy, honestly. That part as well. So it's just super annoying. You have to constantly like change what item you wanna be using, and you can never get stuck with them, and it's just a frustrating system. It feels like, honestly, like it's 30 years dated, right? Of course I understand what they're going with. They want to be horror, right? They want to limit you, how many items you pick up and so on. But it doesn't make any sense, especially with these items that are purely, you see the image here, they're purely worth for like value, like money value. These items should not take up the same space or whatnot as your healing item, whatever. It's just weird how thing works. And then overall, the balance of the items itself is also just terrible. There's one item, this one here, then it reduces your sanity. Then you can like spam stuff. So, some of them gives you like infinite stamina, so you can do infinite combos for a short while or something, and some heals you way more. And the value of them, how you're selling them to back, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it is completely random, honestly. Like, completely random. 100%. The healing item, that heals over time, I think heals you until you have full life. So I tested that once, it's called Kudsuti, and I tested that on a boss fight, and I healed myself right from like half life. Then just before I was gonna be at full life, I ran into the boss, so the boss hurt me. Then it kept healing me. So the fire boss, I think you could stand in the fire with the health reg item there, right? And it will heal you infinitely, because you never reach full life, but it doesn't need to be like turning off your trigger or whatever. So I mean, honestly, this is just buggy, okay? I think most items is buggy, system is buggy, it's just terrible. It's terrible. The whole management is terrible, the value is terrible, and they seem to be really strangely unbalanced. The whole game just feels like that, honestly, the whole fighting in the game is just so terrible. Now, I don't want to spoil the storyline too much here, right? So I keep it very, very light on that. Because after this in here, you will now get a new power-up. People call it an anime power-up, whatever. So I won't show you that scene there. But basically, it all is important to understand with the game before you buy it, so to speak, is that halfway through the otherworld, you basically will like get a power-up that will make transform you. And yeah, it just becomes weirder as well. I don't think I mind this as much as a whole anime aesthetics, whatever people calling it. But from a gameplay standpoint, again, it's like, oh, this is like another gameplay now, but you can turn like immortal or something for like a minute when you're doing it, and it's just like, what is this, right? Because again, the game is so clunky, everything's so slow in the game, you're fighting in the game, it just feels super awful, and it's just like, oh, this did not make it better. It seems super weird, and then it feels like really off too, because then you're having this like super form in the other world, and in normal form you're back to being incredibly slow again, and it just feels really off-putting, and it's just like, no, it doesn't work, okay? It doesn't work at all. But I think it's sad, right? Because when I mentioned again that I do like these kind of things, I love the scarecrow feel, I love the atmosphere in the game, but just the actual fight and the actual gameplay is just like atrocious. It's so slow, it's so clunky, but this was like a good part, yeah. So the game has like, again, it has good, you know, like aesthetics. This thing is cool. The scarecrow is like showing you the path or whatever. I love this thing, yeah. So it frustrates me, honestly. It's really Silent Hill of the frustrating, the frustration, because this could have been so much better if the actual gameplay of the frequency of enemies, the insane bloated sponge enemies, right, and general fighting was smoother, and then plus the item stuff and so forth, right? If all that was fixed, right, it would be a fantastic game instead of a frustrating game. As I mentioned earlier, right, less is more, so much in this game, but to me, it all seems so clear that this area is probably twice as big as it should be, right, because of padding, you know. It just feels lazy, honestly, it feels lazy, right? Why are the enemies so spongy? Again, it's padding. I genuinely think that they dropped in like double the amount of enemies in this area, especially the last part of the game, because they saw that people would beat the game otherwise too fast, right? In this region here, all feels the same. They probably doubled up the area of the otherworld, all the rooms and angles or whatever, because again, they wanted to have like more padding, right? Otherwise the game would be too short. But the problem is, of course, and I'll iterate here, is that, well, actually, the game would be better. Like, the game would straight up be better if you just cut away half the other world and half the enemies and just, again, remove all the bloat or whatever. It'd actually be a better game. And that's like a really big fault of the game developer, not realizing that, okay, this game is short, okay? The game maybe only, like, say, 7 hours. But I wanted to be at least 10 hours. By adding just, you know, actual nothingness, by just adding bloat, just adding spongy enemies, and really, really boring, like, one-dimensional catacombs for like 2 hours, it makes the game worse, right? I would rather have this game being half the running time, and it'll be a better game, especially if I also have to replay it for getting the full endings. So it's a terrible decision overall, right? Now, lastly, the game also has technical issues. I have to also remove points in this game for just terrible technical stuff on PC. I don't want to do that. I tend to ignore that if I can, right? Because I feel that that is not the actual game, the actual art was being right. But just to be very, very fair here and to be very clear, this game has incredible, terrible technical issues on PC. It's insanely bad. And I have to say that there's at least one more minus in like a score, because my game kept crashing all the time, okay? First of all, this is how the game starts, right? The game crashed for me like 3-4 times until I finally could play the game. Like, it crashes when you play a new game. And I said, I love this issue, okay? So this game is really hard to run currently on PC, on Steam, because all the time. Then I played the game for about 4 hours, no crashes. Then I got to this staircase in City, and it's kept crashing there for some reason, like 7-8 times, like seriously. I had to get my drivers or whatever, and I finally got over it after the graphics was really weird, but it didn't crash. And since after that moment, the game has crashed like 10 more times more for me, usually when I load the game, okay? So I get back into it, I start playing the game, and when I load my last save file, then it tends to crash a lot. It's kind of similar to the whole new game stuff. So generally, this game is incredible poor state. It is incredibly badly ported, and I have to say that. I don't want to be the guy, because I don't feel it is that important, right, usually for a game review, but this game actually is like genuinely really badly technically implemented, and it's very, very clear. And also when I go to the last dungeon, I start having like screen tearing sometimes, so forth. But again, I have a really good PC, and I can play every other game basically this year. People can play it by saying, oh, too laggy or whatever. This is the only game so far for me this year an issue with, and it's like freaking issues. And when you get the crash, you can't even send a report on them for some reason. It's really weird, but it happens all the time. And of course, I googled that report, right, and see a lot of people have the same issue. This is very, very common, especially that new game stuff and loading stuff in this game seems incredibly poorly implemented. So that is a big issue in the game as well. It has to be said, unfortunately. That's the review, guys. What do you think? Leave a comment below. So I'm going to give the game then a genuinely 5 out of 10, okay? It'd probably be a 6 out of 10 if the game didn't have those lag and crashes and so forth, right? It must have a lot of Pokemon, Moon and Sun, where every time you will get a new cutscene, they will make a new Lily model. Instead of making a reference to the first model, they will make a new one. So the memory got worse and worse. This game might genuinely have a similar issue, because for me at least, looking at my own crashes and data I got, right, it was like the further into the game, the more and more it kept crashing, and the slower the game moved. So there's something weird with how they're actually optimizing their code. Talking here from my own experience, but I'm guessing that from my own industry experience. So forth, right? But like I said, too many crashes. That is also a minus. So the game has then, right, a lot of issues. And I think lastly what I didn't mention, but I said briefly here, is that, like I said, right, the city part is much better than the otherworld part. It's more interesting, it looks better, it's more atmospheric. Except the scarecrow bit was really cool and so on. And an issue there as well is that you can't really explore that much. When you get to the city, you can explore a little bit, but it's usually you kind of locked away, right, for different areas. And it feels very much like on rails, where you can only explore a tiny bit of city. Then you have to go to the next cutscene or the next, story bit. So that's like the only point where it should have been more is less instead. We should have more exploration, right? But overall, the real, so to speak, real world is much better than the other world, right? But like I said though, I do like the other world scenes, like the Fox guy scenes, the Fox mask scenes. I don't want to spoil that, but you play the game about the different, horror scenes. I think were great. So it is mostly again the gameplay, right? So I think like a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10 is honestly fair, because yeah, it's like half the game is good, the other half is pretty terrible, and then also the technical issues so forth, right? And the limitations, etc. So it feels like a game where I honestly feel sad, because it's so much, it has so much potential. That's how this game feels. Like it has so much potential, and it doesn't really live up to any of it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it should have been, everything that's bad in the game should be less of. It should more, yeah, it just feels like it could have been an amazing game, and it just doesn't reach there in any aspects of it. So it is a disappointing game, absolutely. But I still think, and I want to be very clear here, I think like a 5 or maybe a 6 then, somewhere around that line, it's a fair judgment, because like I said, this is not a 0 out of 10 game, right? This is not 0 out of 10. It's frustrating, it's tedious, but it also has a lot of good moments, right? Sometimes, especially in the beginning of the game, when you're moving around, and it's not as like bloated yet, spongy yet, so to speak, it feels really good. So it's like, it has some really good moments. And lastly, I don't think it's fair overall that a horror game doesn't have to have the best combat. It's more about the storyline and the scenes or whatever. That is fair. I think that's a fair point to make, that I didn't expect this game, right, to have the best horror, the best combat horror or whatever. I didn't expect that, and that is true. However, it's just so bad. You know what I mean? It's just so bad. It's a difference between having like the best combat ever and having the worst, right? And this game is definitely much more in the worst categories. That being said, there are of course worse games, absolutely, right? Also in the combat category, but it's like, so it's a little bit uneven. So I think that to be fair, it's a little bit defense over it. Yeah, you don't play Silent Hill for like the amazing combat scenes or the amazing brutalities or combos, whatever. That is true, but it has to be bearable. And the issue, right, is that if you have then a pretty terrible combat, I keep saying it, right, less is more. You should remove it then. You know what I mean? If the combat isn't good enough, if the combat is mostly just a meh experience, right? And the developer has to know that, right? I keep saying it, fewer enemies, less padding, right? Removing most of the combat to make a better game. And that's just so frustrating again, because it just feels like a lazy thing for the developers to be like, oh, we have to just pad it out. But you pad out the worst part of the game, right? So it feels strange, because that, in the end of the day, right, that's why I don't like these copers, because they will say what I said now, right? Oh, but the combat is the least important part, blah, blah, so on. Yeah, but don't you agree then, from an objective standpoint, that the game should have less combat errors? That the game should have better balanced combat? And overall, though, I mean, it's easy to balance that stuff, you know? If I worked in this game, I would have balanced the monster fight so much better. It's easy mathematics in the end, right? So I don't buy it. But anyway, guys, please subscribe, and have a great day.